guys, so today I decided that I wanted to dwell on politics a little bit because I'm not going to lie, it is something that is kind of daunting for me and also frustrating because you just never know what direction stuff is going to take, and also it doesn't help that the kind of education that I got never really addressed this type of thing like it's something important. And I said to myself, I should go ahead and set aside as much time as possible to just get caught up in the history that I was never introduced to via my school education system. So, one of the things that has caught my attention recently has been the debates that we have had over, who the next president is going to be, 2020 elections, whatever. And I keep hearing the topic of reparations come up. Reparations for, in this case, the black community. What does that mean exactly? I have known what it is, but the way that I find out information is from informal sources. And what I mean by informal is that I hear some friends talking about it, but it doesn't tend to develop into anything more serious, anything that you can say, oh, I will retain this information and do something useful with it. And on top of that, I also hear about it a lot through social media. Social media meaning that any regular average person like me can get in there and speak their mind on the matter. I don't want to sound like I dismiss what people who are not professionals have to say, but hopefully you understand that what I'm trying to say is that usually people who get involved in this topic do not really have a solid background on the matter. There are some average people who may become passionate about a topic and they can become knowledgeable enough to where I believe that they have good credentials, but I wanted to just go ahead and officially do a search on the matter as opposed to allowing myself to be guided by what others say. So, the first thing that I want to share with you guys was something interesting that I saw a few weeks ago on Twitter. And it was this user who posted a series of threads or posted a series of tweets, turned it into a thread, and it had to do with this one really young guy who recently got sentenced to prison for like 50, 55 years over some murder charges or something. And this user's name is No Thanks, and his at name is like Q Got No Rings. And he starts off by saying, you don't have to excuse TK's actions to understand the historical happenings of black children growing up in high pressure, high stress, low resource environments. The real crime here is that the system got another one. It is heartbreaking. And then I said, well, who is this fellow? This TK fellow? And upon doing a quick browse, he is only 19 years old. And he was sentenced to 55 years in prison after being found guilty of murder. And he was also sentenced to 30 years in prison on one count of aggravated robbery and given two additional 13-year prison sentences on two counts of aggravated robbery, and also got fined $21,000. And the sentences will run concurrently. So I'm guessing that means that he doesn't have to serve the first round of, 13 years, and then the next round of 30 years. It's like, as he serves the ones for 13 years, he's also serving the one for 30 years. I'm honestly not very savvy about this. I don't regularly read about stuff like this, but it's important. And then he was also accused of participating in a botched July 2016 home invasion robbery that left a 21-year-old guy dead. And at the time this happened, of course, 2016, he was 16 years old at the time. And basically, the way he became even more known is that he rose to fame in 2017 after releasing some music video entitled The Race. So there you have a little bit of a background on who this guy is. But something that stood out to me is upon reading the series of tweets, I read who that guy was because I had no idea who he was. And it makes sense while you read this person's thread because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of info on his personal life available. But then again, I haven't really taken the time to research that, so maybe a simple Wikipedia search would have yielded that info. So, anyways, going back to Twitter, the guy keeps saying, a lot of us think having liberties in this country is the same as autonomy, but liberties and the concept of free will are diametrically opposed to capitalism. Not everyone has the same amount of choices, and this varies from class to class. And that right there makes a lot of sense because I have always felt like although I live in this country that keeps saying that I am free and I have freedom, as in, you know, I can get to wherever I want to, whenever I want to, and I can work wherever I want to, get a degree on whatever I want to. When I think about what it means to be free, because of what it actually means to be a citizen of this country and what you actually need, I have never felt like I have freedom to live life in a simplistic manner. And what I mean by that is I often have to decide whether I want to, say, accept having health insurance money being withheld from my paycheck, which I don't because I cannot afford it, or say, okay, I'll keep a little bit of extra bill, pray to God that nothing goes wrong, and hopefully I can start saving money to give myself some financial stability in the future. And I think that nobody should have to be put through that. That is a very simple example just to name you something that I personally experienced. Another thing is when you have to deprive yourself of certain things in the name of being a worker. What is normalized here is that you have to be working. And if we hear of someone who's not working, but they're still living their lives, you're wondering, how is that fair? Why do you get to live your life free of worries without working? Why is that acceptable? Why am I not living that kind of life? So the culture of this country, being a capitalist country, revolves a lot on money. Basically, who you are is determined by how much money you have, how much stability you have, how many assets you own. So when you think about that, that generates a lot of stress. And if you are someone who simply does not have a background on that and you're not involved on those matters, when you begin to live your life sort of independently, you start realizing how difficult it is when no one has really sat down with you and explained to you how things work. And ideally, the best time to do that is when you are in school. But school tends to take this matter very lightly, and everything gets portrayed as we're just this nation and we're a bunch of heroes in here. And let's just keep it that way. Let's just mind our own business. But there is a lot of things that don't make sense, and you start asking questions, and that's when you start discovering certain things, especially when politics keep evolving. Why is it that the issues from last year are not the ones that we're really dwelling on this year? But this one particularly stood out to me because, again, I know a lot of friends who discussed this, and I said to myself, I want to understand better the core of how we got here. But yeah, once again, being in a free country does not mean that you're autonomous, because you still have to get up at a time that you don't want to go do a job that you don't want to do, and that you do not have choices necessarily. And I always felt that it was crazy that unless you have a strong background, like a good inheritance or something, you're pretty much set up to a life in which all you do is work and work and work, and then you have to feel guilty about taking some time off because you're telling to yourself, these are my young years. I have to be working to build my better future. Why am I thinking about resting? So I have always felt like that is a form of imposing values that generate stress so that you cannot think about anything else while also still be enriching the greed of other people. And hopefully that will make sense as we progress more into this topic. Reception allowing. Something else that the person said was, which perfectly explains why a middle class child who has never missed a meal due to food insecurity can look down upon somebody like a TK. You and him never had the same choices allotted to you. Therefore, your exposure to capitalism's explicit evils is limited. TK's isn't. Still, this is larger than just TK. In the early 90s, they called Yummy Sandifer? I've never heard of him before. An 11-year-old Chicago boy a monster, all because his environment conditioned him to make violent and immoral choices. This isn't new. America creates an overwhelming amount of its criminals. What motivates somebody to rob, harm, and kill another human over resources? Poverty, and the perception that there isn't any other way. Those who don't have will sometimes take. This is a feature of racial capitalism. Before you judge TK or any other black child that is now serving time for committing a resource motivated violent crime, ask yourself, would this have happened to them if we lived in a society that sees food, shelter, water, clothing, healthcare, and education as a right? It is easy to wag your finger at others. Perfect timing, landscaping people. Anyways, when you don't live in the projects, your mother isn't facing bankruptcy, you don't have a child on the way, you don't live in a food desert, drugs isn't the only viable job you see, and you were not pushed out of school before age 16. And when I read stuff about, oh, maybe you should wait until you have kids, for example, that one particularly upsets me because you should not be telling other people how they need to conduct their lives. It's wild that somebody out there is going to look at me and be like, oh, girl, you have nothing going on for you. You're not married. You don't have strong finances. You don't have an inheritance, and you don't have like a bank account that's happy right now. Shoot, you better not end up expecting. And I'm thinking, you cannot tell me to deprive myself of my opportunity to be a parent just over resources. I should be able to make the decision of becoming a mother and not have to worry about how I'm going to make ends meet and how I am going to make that process possible for me. I think that if I am a member of a society consists of a group of people who get together and put their resources together and ensures that no matter what choices you make, you do not have to worry about how you're going to maintain your food and shelter and how you're going to see another day and take care of yourself when the moment to give birth comes. I feel like at some point that's how things were. People were more close knit, but all of a sudden, capitalism makes it easy for you to not stay close to your family. You're often thinking about, oh, look at me, I'm going to get an opportunity in another state, boom, or I'm going to go to college in another state. But when you think about it, that's not a bad thing. It's good that you get to go out and explore somewhere beyond your hometown, but at the same time, you are not forging strong connections with your family and members of your community. It used to be that no matter where you came from, people would somehow just remember you and know who you are and also keep resources together. But nowadays, people seem to be feeling like autonomy comes with you being able to go anywhere and get just about anything. And for me personally, I think that is odd. And maybe that's why we are living in this current age of loneliness where people feel like they don't have anybody, like they cannot trust anybody, like nobody's there for anybody. Like I created this video back in 2016, I believe, about how I go about my life living without a family, and I have gotten numerous responses of people who are in the same position, similar position, I should say. Some are worse, some are better, some are severe cases, and I'm thinking, what led to that? How did we get to that point? And this is pretty much scratching the surface because this is particularly zooming in on a group of people. But when you think about it, it can be applied on a broader scale because it is people of all ages and races who are complaining about not having anyone in their lives. How did we come to this? But anyways, let's proceed, and then after I finish reading the thread, I will catch up with the comments. Um, Let's see. My heart just breaks because I know other kids do not stand a chance. These environments are meant to produce these outcomes, to fill these jails, to line the pockets of white men whose grandparents made money off our grandparents. And let me stop here. It's all rigged. And I don't want to sound like I am going to, what can I say, justify this case, like the case of TK, because I think that while human nature, I would believe, is to, you will survive, and to survive, you may do whatever it takes, and whatever it takes in the established society may be seen as terrible. But if I think about the ways that maybe thousands of years ago we used to survive, it used to be we would fight wars, and you really didn't stop to think about what taking someone else's life meant. You were thinking about defending your land, defending your family, defending your resources, so you would resort to the act of killing. The act of killing is pretty much hopefully reserved for when you feel desperate. And I don't want to sit here and say that I justify this person, because I think that murder is just absolutely wrong. But like this person said, if you were to guarantee that people can have food, shelter, education, healthcare, and those things, why would there be a need for crime? Usually crimes take place over something that a person doesn't have. Now, romantic crimes are something different. I don't want to just simplify everything and wrap it all in one statement. But usually, if you are someone who's stealing something, is usually because you either are too ambitious and you want the cool stuff without actually paying for it, but also you probably don't pay for it because you cannot dream of having enough resources to do so. But I'm just saying that other people, though, would steal to ensure that they would steal to make sure that they can actually eat for the day or something like that. In that case, I like to weigh it based on that value of what is happening. Like, if you are thieving over owning something cool, like a gadget, a tech gadget, I cannot really respect you too much because that is not a necessity necessarily, unless you depend on that gadget to make a living. Like for me, I'm trying to grow things to do on the side, and those require that I have a camera and internet connection. So I feel like, as much as I love my side grinds, I don't think I would resort to the crime of stealing or, you know, trying to like murder my way to get something. When I think about it, there are many other ways to make money. I would rather just put my projects on hold and then get back to it later. But just like the person said, I have that choice. I have that flexibility for me because I happen to be someone who at least has gathered some years of experience working, and I don't want to say that very easily I could find jobs anywhere, because the skill set that I have are actually pretty limited, to where if I'm going to depend on my current career to have an income forever, I'm going to be in a terrible position, because they're looking for ways to get rid of people who do the job that I do, which is pretty much like customer service, cashiering, being on a like retail store. So, but when it's a crime that is you're stealing stuff because you want to own that, I think that's something that can wait, and I wish that your values were different. But if you're resorting to stealing valuables to make money off them, I can understand, but at the same time, I wish that you didn't just do that, because a lot of the times you end up stealing from the very people who worked extra hard to own things, and you're just going in there and just taking it from them. Like, it's. I want to feel sympathetic, I always do, but at the same time, given the way that I was raised, all I can think of is if you commit a crime, you deserve everything that's coming to you. But now that I am older and I realize that not everyone had the same quality upbringing as I did, which I never had to wonder when my next meal was going to be. I never had to worry about where I was going to sleep. I never had to worry about being able to afford clothes. It's like very easy for me to just, as this person said, look down on the people who truly come from nothing, who truly have nothing. So then I'm thinking, if you were to teach values into individuals who are in this position, would they be able to honor that integrity, or would their drive and need to stay alive still make them resort to these types of heinous deeds? And that's really what I would like to explore as well, because I think that I personally have been in situations where I'm disappointed with the way things are going in my life, and I could certainly resort to questionable means to obtain something, but because it's not the way I am, I'm always afraid of the consequences. I would rather wait or just declare myself unworthy of whatever it is that I want before I mess up my life and record forever. But anyways, it's interesting to explore. And then I found the two articles that I sort of skimmed over, that dwells on what the topic is actually about, which is reparations. And then we're going to explore, according to the stuff that I read, what would make an effective, like, reparations deal type of thing. So let's catch up with the comments. Hello, Jordan. USA is really into politics. It's really about money more than importing ideas to help America. Or I guess you meant policies. Uh, Hello, Mike. In life, bills shouldn't exist on earth because men are so selfish to share things. God made men to share things. That's why bills come from. You know what? When it comes to bills, I always think it's wild. I wish that I could make just a one time payment, and be able to just live with a bill. Like, that doesn't haunt me every month. And what I mean by that is some of this stuff is stuff that you don't even get to see or really perceive with your senses, except maybe the visual one. And to name an example, the internet would be one of them. I don't have home internet, and I do that deliberately. I do that because I always think that me having a few extra bucks in my pocket is better than giving it to another company. I spend 8 hours, some 4 to 5 days a week, in some building full of chaos, and at the end of the day, I'm going to give that money to someone else, to something else. I don't want to describe a company as something that is alive, something that is a person. That's just wild for me. But I would rather keep that and save some of that, and also invest it for when I have unforeseen emergencies. Like, my freaking car right now is stressing me out because between next month or the month after that, whenever it is that I hit a certain mileage, I'm going to need new fucking tires. And those things are expensive. And I have never bought tires for my car before. So now I'm trying to come up with a plan to budget for that. So what I've been doing is every single extra opportunity that I have to make some extra money, no matter how mediocre, I take it. Because I just never know what other problem is going to be found. And I don't want to be stressing over having to ground my vehicle just because it's not in the perfect shape. So, given that my advisor was able to let me know that I can anticipate that's going to happen in the next service, that's when I said, okay, I better take it easy, create some financial plans, and be ready for this thing. And approximately based on my usage, I can anticipate that fall for sure is when I'm going to need to spend that amount of money. And unfortunately, although I do live with more people in this household, it's not like they can do much for me because they too have their troubles going on. So, needless to say, although living with people does alleviate some stress, like it's good that I don't have to worry about the full price tag of rent. It's still stressful that I'm not absolutely autonomous about things because just my resources combined with the resources of other folks around here, we're still in trouble somehow. And we're also helping someone to recover in life as well. So it's unforeseen stuff like that is what I wish I didn't have to worry about. I wish that if something bad happened in the family, like say I get sick sometimes, I should be able to A, have that checked out, and B, take time off to recover. But I always have to decide to write it all out and keep showing up to work even though my bodies cannot take it, because if I don't, that's less money I'm going to see on my paycheck. One of my bills is going to be short, and then what do I do? So, like, I think the idea behind this country is great, but the way it's executed is what needs to be improved in, especially how this alters the perception of people. Because let me tell you, there's some people out there who are just crazy about the materialistic aspect of what it means to be a citizen of this country. And that's something that just blows my mind, especially folks who put too much value on stuff that is just materialistic, like spending money. Just what does it mean to you to spend money? I like to spend money only for my necessities. I don't need to be spending on crazy things to feel fulfilled. There's people who take great passion in designing their homes. Nothing wrong with that. But I just personally cannot imagine living in a place that just has a lot of junk in it just because it looks nice. I know that can support your mental well-being, like you're coming somewhere that looks nice and is neat and smells great, but if I'm not in the position to be living that kind of life, I'm not going to obsess over it. And in addition, there's also the people who put value on traveling. Now, I get it, traveling can be a fulfilling experience. You get to see other places, you get to taste other dishes and ingredients, whatever. It's great, but if I feel like that's not what fills me with joy, then that's not something I can strive for. But anyways, I'm just rambling a little bit there, but I just wish that people would really stop for a second and consider what it is that they want before they engage in activities based on what they have observed from others and then deciding that they want to imitate that. I feel like a lot of people in this country like to imitate other people. You want to imitate someone's fashion sense. You want to imitate what other people drive. You want to imitate how and where other people live. You want to imitate the way that some people dress or some people look. So, an example would be something like older people who simply cannot embrace aging and they feel like they want to imitate young people by getting stuff done to their face. And yesterday I met a lady who said, you know what? Did you know that gray hair does magic around here? It's like they see my gray hair and they're like, she's an old lady. Let's just make things happen for her. Never dye it. And I said to her, oh, I don't intend to dye my hair once it starts graying and whatnot. Because A, I do not have a sense for dyeing my hair, and B, I just don't feel that sense of, oh my god, I cannot accept my hair because it's getting old. Right now, what I do like to do is pluck it. When I see gray hairs, I'm so fascinated by it and terrified at the same time that I end up plucking it. But I have always said that I am going to let my gray hairs just show. It doesn't matter what is about to happen, it's going to just show and be there. And I just do not have any ideas for dyeing my hair. But anyways, again, that's just me rambling. But that's what I wish people would do. Why are you doing the things that you are doing? If you're going to alter your appearance, is it out of vanity? Is it because you want to imitate someone? Is it because you have issues accepting that you are aging and just changing? Like, what is going on? And then you end up obsessing with that aspect about your life that you stop caring about your nutrition, you stop caring about your family, you stop caring about exercising because you're spending too much time looking at magazines looking for ideas. See what I mean? Sometimes people become too obsessed with something and it consumes their time to where they cannot be productive in other things to maybe improve their situation, especially their financial situations. And I'm not saying that I can speak from a position of power because I sure as hell do not have any stability right now. But every day I go to bed knowing I did a great job where I went to, and I also made decisions and put in the hours to make something work for me, and I am seeing results, even if it's slow. That fills me with so much pride. The sole fact that I'm doing something for myself by myself. So maybe if people change their way that they think and approach certain situations, maybe stuff could be better. I feel like people are too obsessed with imitation, like the imitation of what other people's lives are like. But anyways, let's see what else people are saying. Well, I fell behind a little in the comments. Let's see. Statistically, having a man in the picture is better for the child. Absolutely. Like, there's just no way that I can imagine having a kid and having to watch over the child by myself. It's not that I don't have the capacity for it, because fortunately for me, I had my mother as a great example. She made it work no matter what. Here I am. But at the same time, when I think about the things that I have missed out on and I lack when it comes to my character traits due to the absence of a male figure from earlier on, I'm thinking, I don't want my kids to go through this. You shouldn't have to feel like you don't have a safety net to fall on. About growing up in a single parent household was, if I'm mad at my mom, who can I go to? It's weird and awkward that I cannot find refuge from you on another person who has leadership. So I know that's something petty, that's something simple, but to be dependent on just that one person, it would have been nice to have a father that says, you know what, your mother's acting crazy, but at the end of the day, this is why she does it. She does it for your well being. Because when the person who is inflicting pain on you is the one that's saying that they're doing that for your well being, it's kind of difficult to buy that. You think that this person is being disingenuous. But if I would have had another figure telling me, you know what, your mom is right and this is why, one that can sort of console me, it's like, you know what, I can dig it. That makes sense. It didn't make sense in the heat of the moment, and I was definitely not in the mood to listen to that person. But now that you put it like that, it makes sense. And that is having a man, also a two-parent family. So many people nowadays care about having opinions more than the truth, and yes, people are scared in life to have friends or dating. So much bitterness in the social media destroys dating. Yeah, when it comes to dating, I find that it's becoming increasingly difficult because there is just so much stuff influencing you. And I also feel like patience these days is just not strong. It's not there at all. You just want to be involved in something that just naturally works. Nobody wants to put effort, time, and work into it. And if you want for things to work out, you have to invest in it. It's just a rule. Nothing will emerge like successfully without you inputting any work. You have to work for it. But anyways, I just find refuge in the fact that I, as a person, am not like that. I can put time, dedication, and effort into anything that I am interested in. And I am pretty sure that in my dating life, even if I have to go through, I don't know, maybe a few more relationships before I can settle down, at least I will have enjoyed every single one that I was involved in to some extent. And then the bad stuff that happened in any preceding relationship, I'll be like, you know what, this is what I learned. And now, lucky for the next guy, because I'm going to be a better version of a girlfriend than I was for the last one. See what I mean? So I do not stay bitter after an unsuccessful relationship because it's just not my character and it's just not helpful at all. But but anyways, I feel like if people had that spirit and let it cross over to other aspects of life, especially being a worker, yeah, every day stuff seems to get worse, but just hang in there. Because if you do well at your job, eventually you can also transfer that to your house. It's like, don't let this bad stuff that happened at work affect your home life. You can let it affect to some extent, but don't let weeks go by to where you cannot take care of your partner just because you're tired from work. You have to be able to do something in your personal life outside of work. And that's what I try to encourage. There are times in which I am dead tired, but everything that I say has to be done in my day gets done, no matter what. So I guess my point is that I feel like people also have an attitude of giving up. Like you give up on trying to be in shape. You give up on trying to eat healthy. You give up on seeing your family more, calling your family more, or going out more. And I just wonder why. Is it something mental or is it something physical? Or how can you prevent physical conditions, physical symptoms to impact you that severely? See what I mean? But anyway, it's a tricky matter. Um, Back in the day, everybody wanted to date or getting married. It was a shame to being alone. Nowadays, it's cool. USA, nobody should be homeless in the United States the way the United States is always saying land of the free. People are judging the homeless, don't know how they became homeless. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If we are a society, if a group of people is what it takes to build a society, why is it that we turn our backs on the folks who fell behind? The way I look at homeless people is these people, God knows their circumstances, but they just fell a little behind. What can we do to help them? But usually, and I admit I am guilty of this, the first thing I ask is, okay, let me look at this person. They seem whole, they are healthy. Why do they not have a job? So now that I want to reconfigure the way I think, I'm thinking, what would it take for me to end up in that situation? And I like to think, well, if I were to lose my current support that I have when it comes to how I go about having a shelter, yeah, that could possibly be me. If something were to happen to my mother and now my brother, I'm sure that stuff around here will get really bad and tight for me because they're pretty much all I have. And like I expressed earlier, my finances are not strong at all. And that's why I try to use every single hour of my day to be productive toward building a better future for myself. But unfortunately, building a better future is a future that's very distant oftentimes, and some of these life-changing events may happen before my future gets here. And that is the part that I say I shouldn't have to live in this country feeling that way. Like those homeless people, if they would have been guaranteed an education, healthcare, shelter, and food, would that be happening? Of course not. So why is it okay? Why are we promoting this life of, work like crazy to make money, be a slave to the system so that you don't end up like that? I'm thinking, no, how about if we change the criteria, if you change what it takes to actually be resourceful in this country? Like, you shouldn't have to work until you die. You know what I'm saying? That is the thing that terrifies me. One of the things that terrifies me, especially people who are way past their retirement age and they still have to work. Why is that okay? Why are we not demanding that stuff be different? But we end up too invested in our distractions and entertainment that we're not thinking this way. And we're also not engaging in these kinds of conversations. And when you try to engage in this kind of conversation, some people just outright get defensive and you get told to shut up. And I'm like, well, at least I know where my focus is, and I'm not the one who sits there every day complaining about how bad they are, like how bad their situation is. And I'm thinking, well, what did you do today to make your future better? Like, even if it's a slow process, at least I like to say that I'm doing everything I can to build myself a better future. And the best thing about it is that I'm there mostly by myself. You know, my stuff on the side that I do, I have created it by myself. I have built it by myself, pretty much. Let's see. I'm going to catch up with the comments, and then after that I'll catch up with the articles that I should have started off the stream with, because we're definitely going on tangent here. But anyway, it's okay. Hello, Lone Wolf. Good to see you. Zimri, the Rothschild sells guns all over the world to anybody. The police chasing street punks, but not the main bad guys created and selling guns. Only God can stop the Illuminati. Zimri, I feel you about life, things people should do or the things they shouldn't do, but it's important to save all the money, even coins for backup. God wants everybody to have money. Please help others. Zimri, you will be rich because you can handle things in life, and I believe you can take care of your money, not money crazy of spending money on wild things. People need to do that. Yeah, honestly, I don't wake up in a day and say, fuck, I need a better TV, I need a bigger TV, or I need a new phone. My phone is showing symptoms that it wants to die. And if that were to happen, I'm like, well, maybe I could activate a backup one, or maybe I could revert to the flip phone, or like, you know, those really old phones or something, so that my bill is $40 as opposed to like $140 for 2 stupid lines. And then I'm thinking, well, I cannot let that happen like that, because then at least a quarter of extra income that I have would be gone. But then at the same time, if I can lower that bill for a period of time, I can eventually get back to the way things are. But the problem with that is that I will fall behind in time when it comes to the amount of work that I have been able to input. Say, you guys know that I mentioned that I sell clothes online. So if I stay away, that is promotions that I'm no longer doing, product that I'm no longer like uploading into the site. So that is effort, time, labor hours that I am falling behind in. And then when it comes to streaming, let's pick the channel. The less time that I spend in here, the more likely I am to end up losing more subscribers than I'm already losing. And on top of that, the hours of watch time that I need so that I can keep it monetized. But then I'm thinking, this is not really a viable way for me to make money, because I simply am not focused on building this thing. I am very grateful that I was able to meet the criteria to even have monetization enabled, and I would love to just focus on that success only. But at the same time, if I was able to make it, why not make an effort to keep it? See what I mean? But realistically, I keep it real. I say to myself, my origins here is I did this because it's something I enjoy, something I'm genuine about, and I had no idea that this could even help me make a few bucks on the side. But now that I discovered that it's possible to do that, I want to maintain it, but I'm not letting that consume me. And that's the difference. There are people out there who would be genuinely upset if they were to lose their lifestyle as they know it, but yet they want for things to be better. I have known people who have told me, I like my lifestyle, but I have to work so much. I have to work so many hours to keep this fancy place that I live in with all the fancy things in it and this and that." And I'm like, well, welcome to the world of having to decide your values. If you want more family time, maybe consider cutting your hours, cutting your paycheck, but living more modestly. What is wrong with that? There is nothing wrong with that. But there are people who are terrified about that. And that's why I say I pre established that the thing that would make me happy is having time to be by myself and not be completely physically broken down. In order for me to avoid being completely physically broken down, I need to make decisions. And one of the decisions is, given the type of job that I do, I should not expose myself to that place for extended periods of time. So being full time would have had me physically broken down worse than I am now. And that is the thing. Why would you want to work more to have more, only to have to invest the extra that you make on being at the doctor, getting fixed up, for example? See what I mean? It's not that living a life of limited resources is going to prevent you from getting sick, not at all. But I see everybody who holds important positions in like all these companies, and they're all fatigued and wiped out and they're gaining weight and everything. And I said, that is what I did not want for me. That is what I did not want to go home with, take home with me. It's not worth it, especially if life is as short as people say. It's also too short to be living it in misery and poverty. But again, that's when you need to decide, what does it mean for you to be poor? Because for me, I get to shower every day, wear clothes every day, eat every day, go to a shelter every day. All of the necessities, except for healthcare, pretty much most of them are fulfilled. Four-fifths of the things that I need in life are fulfilled. So now I am making a plan to be able to get that fifth thing that I need. And after I have that fifth thing, it's like I won't have to worry about much. I can ambition to have more things, to maybe feel like I'm living a more fun life, like being able to have a weekend off and go somewhere. But when I think about it critically, I don't feel the need to leave the local area that I am in to have a good time. See what I mean? So some people need that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you should not obsess over that until you're in the position to where you can even consider that. And I feel like a lot of people make impulse decisions that land them in a difficult situation, and that is when I lack empathy. That's when I start saying, well, you make your decisions. So you need to be able to play this game of, you will not be able to get stuff now and immediately, but if you put forth a plan, it can happen. But you need to be patient. And that's what I feel people are not being reinforced in nowadays, the patience department. Let's see. But yeah, while Jordan says that I'm going to be rich, you know what the first thing I would do if I were rich? I would take care of people's debts. Because there's nothing worse than living, seeing your hard-earned money just going somewhere else. So as soon as I know that someone is in trouble, all I want to do is make you more comfortable. So that's the first thing I would do, because I would love for my debts to be taken care of. So I know how much relief that would bring to me. So what better way to bring relief and comfort to other people than by getting rid of their debt? That would be amazing. Hello, Jack. Hello, Mugen. It's Mugen. Good evening to you. When I get rich, I'll buy toys, shoes, and clothes, but the important stuff to cure cancer, AIDS, blindness, building schools, hospitals, I'll spend my money on health to help people, not cars, and so much more. And on the note of health, people keep celebrating the fact that Planned Parenthood was defunded, and I'm thinking, why do these people not realize that there are more services that facility made available for low-income people? They like to focus on the most atrocious thing, right? Which doesn't even have to happen that often in their clinics, but it's just crazy that people don't see that as a value. Like you're only seeing it as a product. Okay, I understand why. Because in order to improve a product, you have to develop it, R&D. But at the same time, if this is a product that is keeping people well and alive and stuff, and you know that our education system is not the greatest at telling us what the best way to take care of our bodies is, why would you celebrate something that's making it possible for people who end up messed up physically or just needing stuff? Why do you make it difficult for them to have access to that? That's the weird thing. And then you're trying to say that you are morally better or ethically better. No. Until you learn to love the people who are living and breathing, then you can play the card of, oh, we do this because of the abortions. We do this because abortion is terrible. Well, do you not think it's terrible that people have to live homeless? You don't think it's terrible that some people never have a fair opportunity of having education? What? So maybe, just maybe, make the lives of the living better, and maybe the living will not have to resort to that type of thing. So I only focus on seeing the solution, the greater solution. But the solution takes effort, patience, and work. And I feel like people want to miraculously see stuff happen immediately. It doesn't happen like that. We have inherited a broken like system, a broken country, a broken economy, whatever the hell you want to call it. So the cost of that is generational. So the more that generations postpone the solution for that, the more prolonged the problem is. Just like the environment. The cost of environmental issues is generational, not just an overnight thing. But anyway, hopefully you see the association I'm trying to make there. I proudly display my gray hairs, all 7 of them. Even the mighty oak tree began as an acorn. Yep. Because we are undergoing a process of social destruction. Yep. It's the people who are not even trying to keep up, not those trying, but for reasons beyond their control fell behind. I agreed, some people just opt out. They in no way, shape, or form want to try. One of my favorite YouTubers. Oh, thanks a lot. What happened to the screen? Is there a problem with the screen? I honestly cannot see anything. Alright. So finally, close to an hour later, we are going to read some articles about what I think are an important aspect of reparations, and that is land. Apparently, there was a lot of land that was stolen about 100 years ago, at the very least, from black people. And then what is being done about that, and how did this even happen? I initially heard about this some 2 years ago, but I never really got to research it, so I feel like now is a good time to do that. And it's also been coming up on Twitter, especially, again, with all these political debates going on and who wants to get that vote. So everyone is suddenly interested in talking about reparations, but no one ever truly has a long-term effective solution. But I think that if you own land in this country, that is a good way to get ahead of the game. But no one usually discusses that. But here we are going to. Any discussion of reparations must include how this happened, who did it, and the laws and policies and practices that allowed this. I have not read this. I only skimmed through it to make sure that the info in it would be something that would be relevant to what we're talking about. And this comes from the New York Times. Let's see. House Judiciary Subcommittee on Wednesday, and this was written when? June 20th, 2019. So, the Wednesday of that week, held the first hearing in over a decade on the issue of reparations for Black Americans. The hearing took place fittingly on the Juneteenth holiday, commemorating the announcement of the end of slavery in the United States, and 5 years after the writer Ta-Nehisi, who testified, reignited the debate with his 2014 essay, The Case for Reparations. Once a fringe topic, reparations has emerged as an issue in the 2020 presidential campaign, with several leading candidates for the Democratic nomination expressing support for the various measures to atone for America's racist past. Thanks to Mr. Coates and others, today's movement for reparations places as much emphasis on the racist public policies of the 20th century, which denied Black Americans opportunities to build wealth and left them vulnerable to all manner of economic exploitation, as it does on the crimes of slavery. Many leading proponents of reparations point to the federal government's failure to provide land and resources, 40 acres and a mule, to former slaves following emancipation, as promised, as laying the course for today's inequities. Had such a racial land reform taken place, it is easy to envision that the vast current differences in wealth between black and non-blacks would not exist. I guess that is a typo. Blacks and non-blacks is missing an S. Mr. Darity has gone so far as to use the ungranted 40 acres of land that was due former slaves as the basis for calculating the amount of reparations due to their descendants today. And then, of course, this has turned into an issue because the discussion usually takes the turn of, well, if this was intended for your ancestors, why do you feel like you're entitled to having reparations when you were not a slave yourself? That was for your ancestors, but you don't live as a slave right now. And that's when I say, remember that the people who descend from rich people are not the ones saying, you know what, my ancestors were rich, I do not deserve to be rich because I did not work to grow the family business or whatever asset it is that makes them rich. Are rich people saying that? No. So therefore, when it comes to the issue of reparations, you put these individuals at a disadvantage to where competition is impossible, in the same manner that big companies tend to not die so easily. Like, say, when do you think Walmart is going to expire? When do you think Amazon is going to expire? Probably never, because they are the leaders of their respective industries. So I think it's odd that that's even a criteria that is being used, because you do not need to be a rocket scientist to understand that if your ancestors are not able to give you something to inherit, you will be at a disadvantage socially, financially, and education wise. So just give these people what is due to them. You can do it, but for some reason you just don't want to. And that is why we have these issues in the present. And some other people, and I have seen this in like social media debates, let's call it that. Some people say, well, if you were to give these people reparations, they're probably going to waste it anyway. It's like some people do not know how to invest that money. Some people wouldn't know what to do with their newly attained like assets. And I'm thinking, that's not up to you to determine. If I decide that I have a grant of $250,000 and I want to buy $250,000 worth of leggings, that is not your business. See what I mean? Some people are going to turn that into a legacy. Some people are going to turn that into a home. Some people are going to turn that into travel opportunities, education opportunities. You cannot try to cancel someone's chance at getting something just because you think that they're going to mismanage it. That's not up to you. And yes, I would mismanage mine on $250,000 worth of leggings. But anyways, I wouldn't. But anyway, see what I mean? Those discussions is what make me sad that it comes down to that, because it lets you know where our education system is at, to where people like this who think this way exist. It shouldn't happen. If this is a nation who were truly ahead when it comes to education, this shouldn't be a problem. This shouldn't be a thing. But somehow it is. Let me see what the comments are saying before I fall behind too much. Are you familiar with the Black Townships? I have heard of them, but I have never really dwelt on them. You're going to talk about carpetbaggers? Yes, I am going to talk about them carpetbaggers. You know, I remember that was one of my favorite chapters in U.S. history when I was studying it in eighth grade, because my second teacher, it was we had one teacher at the beginning, and then they got replaced by someone else. He was a carpetbagger, and he was from Michigan, so that's how we associated the term. Everybody got that question right on the test. You know, what makes someone a carpetbagger? Someone who comes from up north. Consider which states are the states from up north. Like, which ones are they? It was just a fun time. And unfortunately, the version of history that you learn as an eighth grader is like really watered down. And I understand that there's some stuff that an eighth grade mind may not be ready for. But I mean, think about it. How were our ancestors when they were 8? What were they exposed to? What could they do? I bet you some people knew how to cook by the time they were 8 years old. See what I mean? So, what determines your maturity for when you have a right to learn something and when you don't? That's crazy to me. The earlier you expose a human to the tough shit, I think the better off they'll be. But for some reason, most people disagree with that. You have to protect the innocence of kids and the virginity of people. Like, at some point, you need to let people just explore things and try things and maybe even be exposed to traumatic stuff and then help them build from it. Because I'm just very grateful for all the abuse that I have endured in my life, because there's just no way I would be the person I am today if it weren't for all those experiences. See what I mean? So it's awful during the moment it happens. All you focus on is on how miserable your circumstances are, but to know that you will overcome that is an amazing feeling. And sometimes I just wish that people could experience it in the same manner I did, although I did not wish for people to suffer. But sometimes it is necessary in order for you to grow. And I find that people are trying to avoid those circumstances at all costs, despite the level of wisdom that is attached to that type of thing happening. Let's see, where am I at? This thing likes to just randomly scroll to the top, and now I have to find my way. Or people like Sarah Rector or Jake Simmons. I have heard of Jake Simmons Jr. Paul Coffey or the Republic of Maryland. Some of that, yeah, some of that sounds familiar, but I'm not very savvy on any of them to really have an extended opinion. But in addition to invoking the 40 acres black people never got, the reparations movement today should be talking about the approximately 11 million acres black people had but lost in many cases through fraud, deception, and outright theft, much of it taken in the past 50 years. These property holdings could have provided a foundation for black wealth building in post-Jim Crow America. Instead, they became a source of riches for others. Rather than helping to close the racial wealth gap, blacks' land holdings became a key force in widening it. Black land taking has been as instrumental as the denial of opportunities to acquire property in creating today's racial wealth inequality, and offers a more telling indicator of the barriers to upward mobility black people faced and continue to face in America. Understanding how this happened, identifying who did it, and addressing the laws, policies, and practices that allowed and continue to allow it to happen must be at the center of any discussion of reparations. In the decades after the end of Reconstruction, as the nation abandoned its black citizens and the South descended into the age of Jim Crow, African Americans succeeded against all odds in acquiring a remarkable amount of land. And with land comes money, and with money comes resources. Or with land comes resources, and also with resources comes money. Money brings you stability, and with stability comes happiness and leadership and strength and all that good stuff. But when you take that by force, that's how you end up people who seem like they're lacking leadership. And let's face it, we tend to associate black people with being folks who lack discipline, intelligence, and all that stuff. Why did it come down to that? That's the stuff that nobody wants to discuss. Like every statistic ever that you read, they always put you at the bottom. It's like, are you inherently like that based on your genetic composition, or is there a political reason for that? Is there a social reason for that? And there is. But I hate that it doesn't get discussed. This doesn't get put out there. We just accept the statistics that get thrown to our faces, and we don't dare to think outside of that. We don't dare to ask the question of under what circumstances are these statistics achieved? Who is being measured? I never get asked questions on like what my situation is to be able to contribute to such a thing. You might say the census. Well, the census doesn't know everything that happens around here or how it happens. So I think that throwing statistics like that is a way to just manipulate the public into thinking that a group of people is better than others. But we're not discussing how that happened. African American succeeded against all odds. Okay, I just read that. They did so in spite of the constant threat of forced dispossession at the hands of white mobs and officials. Sometimes black property owners faced sudden and violent attacks, such as the racial cleansing of Forsyth County, Georgia in 1912 and the destruction of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. As often, though, whites undermined blacks' property ownership by more subtle means. White tax assessors routinely overvalued black-owned land, forcing black property owners to bear a heavier tax burden than whites to pay for services they didn't receive, and slowly draining families of earnings. If black owned property became valuable or a black property owner challenged white supremacy, local officials could simply declare the property tax delinquent and sell it at a tax sale. Writing in 1940, the National Association for African Colors, but NAACP. Special Counsel Thurgood Marshall described the manipulation of tax delinquency laws by white officials in the South as a practice and custom of depriving Negroes of their property through subterfuge. Despite this, at the dawn of the Civil Rights era, African Americans still held substantial amounts of land, mostly in the South, a major portion of which was more of the region's fastest growing areas and hottest real estate markets. Thanks to huge federal investments during the New Deal, the South in the mid-20th century went from being what President Franklin Roosevelt described as the nation's #1 economic problem in the 1930s to the booming Sun Belt by the 1960s. The region's rapid growth, along with the emergence of new industries like vacationing and tourism in rural and coastal areas, created an insatiable demand for land and made black property owners targets for removal by white officials and plunder by profit-seeking speculators. Both exploited the byproducts of blacks' history of oppression to achieve their objectives. The story of Evelina Jenkins, a black South Carolina Sea Islands native, offers a case in point. She owned dozens of acres of property, including an entire island, at a time in the early 1970s when land values along the state's coastline were skyrocketing. As a result of the state's pitiful expenditures on colored schools, Ms. Jenkins had received only minimal education and never learned to read. Decades of disfranchisement and wide control of local government and the courts had taught her that whatever rights and protections it afforded did not apply to her. Even venturing inside the local government offices where people registered for licenses or paid their taxes was an invitation to be mistreated and humiliated and was something to avoid. So Miss Jenkins entrusted a white neighbor who had befriended her to take her annual property tax payments to town for her. But rather than submitting Miss Jenkins' payments, he pocketed them, then waited for her taxes to fall delinquent, went to her property at the country's annual tax auction. Then, after the statutory redemption window closed, he gained title to her land holdings, island and all, which he subsequently resold to a developer. In the decades since, the land Jenkins once owned has generated untold amounts of wealth. Houses on the island, once owned today, sell upward of $400,000. Miss Jenkins, though, never saw a dime of it. Rather, rather than leave her children an ample inheritance, she died penniless, forced to live out her last days in her daughter's mobile home. While Miss Jenkins' case was particularly egregious, the legal theft of black land in similar ways was not uncommon. In booming real estate markets like Hilton Head and surrounding sea islands, tax sales afforded investors a lucrative opportunity to acquire valuable property for pennies and on the dollar. Here and elsewhere, local tax assessors served as accessories before the fact, deliberately overvaluing black-owned land or enacting sharp, capricious assessment spikes as development crept near, all aimed at forcing poor black farming families to sell under duress or steering them into tax delinquency. So see what I'm saying? It's crazy stuff like that that makes you wonder, you know what? There is something going on in the government and they try to deny it, but when you see this pattern that certain people are well off and others aren't, you cannot tell me that it's just coincidentally that a group of people does better than others on the basis of skin pigmentation. It goes way beyond that. So what can I say? Every time I read stuff like this, it is upsetting, especially since we live in times where, given that this was decades ago, some of this stuff happened centuries ago, but in reality, those years, it's still pretty recent in my mind. Like, when I hear of something that happened 60 years ago, to me that's recent. 70 years ago, that's recent. My grandparents had been alive by then. So, we cannot ignore that this is a thing, but unfortunately, we're not talking about it. And if we're talking about it, we're not talking about it properly. But at least on my part, I want to know as much as possible on the matter, just so that the stuff that unfortunately happened to other people does not end up happening to future generations. So I think the good thing about our current generation is that information is accessible. You just need to know how to search for it, and if you don't know how to search for it, where to go and whom to ask. But I'm just glad that some of this info is getting out there and some of it is even getting promoted, because again, this helps me come to the realization that I wasted a lot of time in school learning about stuff that's not important. I don't know about investments. I don't know about how to start and keep a business. I don't know about how to buy a house. I don't know about how to write a will. And I think that that's stuff that you just need to learn. And people back then just seemed to have it all together. But some people did not have it all together because they were deprived of learning the skills of being literate. So at least that's not something that we're overly concerned with nowadays. But although we can read and write, it does not mean that we have the comprehension for it. Because let me tell you, although some people read, it's like, what did you gather from the context that you just exposed yourself to? Some people don't know. So technically, you still don't know how to read. You read, you see words and symbols, you recognize them, you know how to pronounce them, but you really do not know what that means, how that applies to you, or what to do with what you're reading. See what I mean? So now we have a new tragedy and problem in our hands, which is people can read and write, but if they write something, it doesn't make sense. If they read something, they do not know what they just read. And our school systems are reflecting that. A lot of people have to retake tests in the 21st century for some reason. How does that make you competitive? But anyways, let me see what the newer comments said. Hello, JP. It is called infantilization. It's why so many people are easy to keep stupid, keep them in an illusion. Exactly. Over 100,000 black people receive between 80 to 100 acres in the states of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas. Yep. Many became ranchers and oil tycoons. Hugs to Samri. Hugs to you. And yeah, that's true. See what I mean? Having land, it is something. It is something that you can invest with. But nowadays, these people just have nothing. Like, at least my parents, one of the divorce, I guess, what is it? The settlement, part of the settlement was that they had to have a house to bring up 2 kids. So essentially, I do have something to inherit, but it's not really. I don't want to say that it's insignificant because houses can go up in value, but for me personally, I have zero intention of going back to my hometown. And if I were to inherit that house, which I won't because I have a sibling, we would have to get together and decide what we're going to do with it. I would turn it into a business. I would probably rent that mug out and have that as a supplement income. But of course, to do that, you need to see so and so, register this and that, report this and that, tax this and that. So, because I don't know much about that, it seems daunting, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to miss out on that opportunity. But also, it is stuff like that, that complicated process that discourages people. And some people end up selling it. I remember telling my mom a few times that she should sell that house if we're not living in it. But I also told her, unfortunately, if you want to turn it into a business, you can, but you have to educate yourself on what it takes to turn it into a business. Of course, she doesn't, because she feels like she's in an age in which she cannot really grow much anymore intellectually. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. You worked way too hard to maintain that thing for over 30 years now, or for close to 30 years. So what are you doing, lady? Just, you're smart. You got a bachelor's degree from like the 80s. You can do this. But at the same time, that lady is tired. She is fatigued. And a lot of people can relate to that. You may not make wise choices and you let the fatigue get to you. And in the end, it is your offspring who end up suffering. And you too end up suffering. But anyways, I'm going to take a sip of water because I'm getting dry. Oh, that's so much better. And basically, this just continues talking about the financial aspects of this matter. Tax sales were just one of several ways speculators and developers manipulated property tax and laws and exploited historic inequities to expropriate black people's land. Another was the forced partition sale because whites controlled the courts. Blacks who acquired property during Jim Crow often opted to handle matters of inheritance informally outside of the legal system. Instead of probating their wills, black property owners tended to bequeath their property to descendants in the form of undivided shares, an arrangement under which heirs become co-owners of a property, each with the right to sell his or her own interest. Predatory land speculators would search for a person who had recently inherited land this way and was willing to sell his or her share. Once the sale went through, the speculator, now a co-owner of the property, would have the right to petition the courts to order a sale of the entire tract of land against the wishes of those family members who lived on it, and would then buy it. These partition sales invariably resulted in the land being sold at well below its market value, enriching the buyer while leaving displaced and dispossessed family members with nothing. Speculators have used this legal system to trick to force the sale of millions of acres of black-owned land over the past several decades. Only in the past couple of years have some states begun to adopt a uniform law designed to curb the most predatory abuses of heirs property laws. Much of the damage, though, has been done. And that's one of the things that I remember some of my family members would say, because some people did have land, and they would say, whatever you do, don't sell, don't sell, don't sell. And I never understood what that meant, what it meant to keep something. Because I always felt, well, why would I not want to sell something if I'm not going to use it? If I'm not going to immediately benefit from it. Whereas if I sell it, that's money that I see, and that is money that I can do something with later on. Hang on, let me reach for this thing. Ooh. Okay. There we go. Let's see. But yeah, I never understood what it meant to keep something like that. And it makes sense. You can turn it into a business at the very least. And also, anyone in the family who needs somewhere to stay, you have somewhere to stay, you have something to give them, you have a legacy of some sort. But some people just really have nothing. You're going to keep sliding. Anyway, I'll just let it drop. But anyways, okay, let's see what the comments are saying. Thanks. What was that lady's name again? That lady's name was Jenkins. Was it Patricia Jenkins? Evelina. Evelina. Evelina Jenkins. And that's what I'm saying. Why isn't this in the history books? I think a story like this is interesting. So, we should have learned about that in school, but I learned about this outside of school. Indeed, many of the techniques used to take black-owned land remain legal today. The tax sale law that allowed someone to steal Miss Jenkins' land remains on the books in South Carolina and many other states, and continues to be used to extract wealth from poor and vulnerable communities across America. Tax buying thrived in the wake of the 2008 housing foreclosure crisis as the number of tax delinquent homes mushroomed, and today in gentrifying cities where rising property assessments function as a self-fulfilling prophecy, predicting the changes local officials hope to bring enforcing low-income people out. Many local governments have resisted calls to protect homeowners from predatory tax buying and have instead sought to increase profitability for investors. Other cities have taken aggressive steps to foreclose on tax delinquent properties. Between 2011 and 2015, Detroit initiated tax foreclosures on 1 out of every 4 properties in the city, an epidemic of tax delinquency caused, in large measure, by the illegal overassessment of lower valued properties. Then and now, the victims of discriminatory overtaxation and predatory tax buying are disproportionately black. These continuing practices, more than the government's broken promise of 40 acres and a mule 150 years ago, explain why black families today have 10 cents to every dollar held by white households, and why that gap continues to widen. It's why the history of black land, because the scale of the loss was so great, but also because it forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that American prosperity has not bypassed black Americans so much as it has come directly at their expense. It's no coincidence that African American communities on the Sea Island suffered their heaviest land losses in the 1970s and 1980s, the same decades when the area experienced its most rapid economic growth. Indeed, slavery and Jim Crow not only excluded generations of black Americans from benefits and opportunities enjoyed by white Americans, it also exposed them to the most predatory features of our capitalist system. It turned black people's earnest attempts to build wealth in the American way through property ownership into an opportunity for others to profit at their expense. If we ever hope to repair the damage racism has done to America and address the dividends it continues to pay to white Americans, we cannot simply open to black Americans previously closed doors of opportunity or merely provide some form of compensation for past injustices. We must also work to dismantle the laws and policies that sanction the continued extraction of property and resources from black communities. And then if you were wondering about the, let me see. This thing is having a slow moment. From 15 million acres to 1 million, how black people lost their land. It pretty much says more of the same thing. It also mentions during the Obama administration, the U.S. Department of Agriculture settled with black farmers for $2.3 billion for their long-standing claims of discrimination in farm loans and other government programs. Over the years, black people have lost their land through a number of circumstances, including government action, deception, and a reign of domestic terror in the South that forced black people from their homes through threats of violence and lynching. That terror and economic exploitation precipitated the Great Migration, which resulted in the uprooting of over 6 million black people from the South and their relocation to the North. There go your Southerners turned carpetbaggers. North, Midwest, and West between 1916 and 1970. How we lost the land is an untold story. An investigation by the Associated Press documented the process by which people were tricked or intimidated out of their property. If you wonder where I'm reading this from, this comes from AtlantaBlackStar.com. In this study of 107 land takings in 13 southern and border states, 406 landowners lost over 24,000 acres of farm and timber land and 85 properties such as city lots and stores. The property, which today is owned by white people and corporations, is valued in the tens of millions of dollars. In recent years, groups such as the Federation of Southern Cooperatives in Atlanta and the Land Loss Prevention Project in Durham, North Carolina, receive new reports of land takings on a regular basis, while the Penn Center in St. Helena Island in South Carolina has gathered 2,000 such cases. One story from the AP provides the context by which families lost their land to thievery and violence. And we are going to read them. Ugh. After midnight on October 4th, 1908, 50 hooded white men surrounded the home of a black farmer in Hickman, Kentucky, and ordered him to come out for a whipping. When David Walker refused and shot at them instead, the mob poured coal oil on his house and set it afire. According to contemporary newspaper accounts, pleading for mercy, Walker ran out the front door, followed by 4 screaming children and his wife carrying a baby in her arms. The mob shot them all, wounding 3 children and killing the others. Walker's oldest son never escaped the burning house. No one was ever charged with the killings, and the surviving children were deprived of the farm their father died defending. Land records show that Walker's 2.5-acre farm was simply folded into the property of a white neighbor. The neighbor soon sold it to another man whose daughter owns the undeveloped land today. And that's another thing. There's people who buy properties like crazy. These like rich people who buy homes and whatnot. What do you do with that? A lot of them are empty. And for some reason, that's okay. And it's also okay to keep fluctuating rent prices. That should be something that we fight against, because I think it's crazy that there's no cap for how high rent can be, but for some reason there is a salary cap or a wage cap or something. That is crazy to me. Land is among the most important assets people can own. Certainly, for the rural society in which many African Americans traditionally have lived, land represented prosperity, intergenerational wealth, family, and community. According to the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, land can be a vital part of cultural and social identities, a valuable asset to stimulate economic growth, and a central component to preserving natural resources and building societies that are inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. It is more about land as a home, it's about economics and culture all rolled up into one. Let's see. Organization serves 15 counties in the Palmetto State, blah, blah, blah. On the Sea Islands, development, gentrification, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to not sound so repetitive, so I'm trying to sight read and read ahead to make sure that's something I said in the previous article. I'm not saying again. For generations, families have had the land procured through the blood, sweat, and tears of their ancestors until many are forced to sell it. The center promotes sustainable land to use help historically land used to help historically undeserved families realize the wealth building asset of their land and prevents heirs property owners from losing their land. Under the concept of heirs property, a form of communal land ownership. Stop doing that. It keeps loading apps and it keeps scrolling my freaking page. Found among rural communities in the South, both black and white, numerous heirs of the original landowner are co-owners of the land, each owning a percentage share. They may be 20, 30, or 50 or more people scattered around the country, and in some cases have never visited the land, and may not even know they are co-owners. The problem arises when corporations and developers entice family members to sell their share, becoming family members themselves and forcing a partition sale, a court-mandated auction sale of the land, all without notice to the other family members. It is a real issue, says someone. Land has been in the hands of African American families through the heirs' titles passed from generation to generation without a clear title to the land. Let's see. Rather, land was passed through oral tradition without access to the judicial system or the ability to hire a lawyer. Once again, something we read previously. Although heirs property is a rural characteristic rather than a racial one for black people who have had more than their share of exploitation, the suffering is compounded. I talk about this as an injustice. We call it legalized theft. We are trying to level the playing field by clearing the title. Jenny Stephens noted that while the issue of land loss is not new, it is receiving more attention these days. Indigenous black landowners now find themselves grappling with the same land loss issues facing Native Americans. Once thought to be the most unproductive land, now everyone wants to live in the Sea Islands area. 40 new people coming every day, and the attraction of industry, Boeing, Volvo, and the desirability of living here has logarithmically increased the pressure of development. Hurricane Hugo helped shine a light on issues facing the coast as forests amid these heirs' properties were destroyed. With few laws on the books to protect landowners, it is easily lost and families torn apart. Let's see. Overseas don't help handicapped people getting checks, but USA do. That's why USA is so best. Yes, black people have been through a lot. I know all races do, but black people gotta fight for everything. Black people may or have so many ideas, but racist men steal ideas like hockey, blood transfusion, and much more. Yeah, I think it's crazy, like how because of stuff like this, people have to work insanely extra, insanely more, where other people just seem to get like a pass through everything. Like, no, I think I think we should live in a meritocracy, a true meritocracy. Reason why rich people forcing people taking their lands is worth billions of dollars of oil for gas, cheating innocent people for not telling them the real price. It's like investment. You never truly know the value of investing unless you try it out, but also it comes with a risk, and a lot of people don't have money to play like that, to take risk. Most black Americans are consumers and not producers. That's the problem, not racism. Well, I think that some instances like that, I like to think what made them get in that situation to where they're consumers and not producers. And I think that it's because of the way the system is set up. We don't get educated to be producers and also create our own fate. And what I mean by that is that we keep saying, go to school, go to school, go to school, get a good job, get a good job, get a good job, so that you can buy a house, buy a car, buy this, buy that, buy fancy clothes, get to travel. It's like everything that keeps getting promoted is stuff that will make people consume, make people splurge. And I think that people get confused and caught up in that. And that's why I'm saying that we need to reform the way we educate people. Because we seem to be concerned with only getting people into schools. And if you think about it, school is a form of consumerism. Going to school nowadays is a luxury. And I think that education shouldn't have to be that way. I mean, you ever look at colleges endowments, I think it's the name, where pretty much what you pay for tuition is not even for the benefit of the school. The school itself is a business. So someone is making money off that school. And I think that's wild. Just like prisons make some like business owners rich, like really big companies or something. I haven't really ever explored the topic, so that's why I cannot really mention who runs those things. But that's what I'm saying. This is a very consumeristic society. Consumerism goes beyond just being a buyer of stuff. It also means the stuff that you commit to. Well, sorry, I still am phrasing that wrong. Like, it's not just being a buyer of toys, like gadgets that are cool. It's about the mindset that you have that makes you feel like you have to be engaged in those activities in order to feel satisfied in your life. So if you don't make enough money to where you can afford those things, then that's when you feel like you're living a mediocre life. And I think that is wrong. Because just because I don't live a fancy life doesn't mean that I'm mediocre. I'm just someone who consumes what is necessary. But I find it that there's people who criticize me for living. Like, I get told that I'm not in the 21st century because I don't have home internet. And I'm thinking, I mean, do you not think that there's already enough entertainment in my hands, for example? What do you think I need internet for? The stuff that I do online does not justify me having that bill. Why would I have that bill? Also, if I need Wi-Fi that bad, I can always grab my computer, go to a library, spend an hour or two there doing whatever it is that I cannot do in it from my phone, and just keep going with my life. But I do not need to feel that at midnight I need to have Wi-Fi in my house. I just don't. So unless I got a job that somehow paid me like the wage or the what is it, every 2 weeks kind of pay that I get. I'm not getting it, you know? But anyways, only I understand that because, like I said, some people are heavily dependent on that stuff and I am not. I just found ways to make my phone useful for me given its features. So why would I be interested in Wi-Fi? And back in the day when I had Wi-Fi here, the only device that was connected to it was my freaking third generation iPod. That's not justified at all. And now it is so outdated and it's starting to die on me because the screen looks like the ink itself is just spreading through the screen. That's just not justified. And now that I have mom's laptop, she doesn't use it anymore. I'm like, well, that still doesn't justify me having Wi-Fi here because the amount of time I actually spend at home plus what I actually do on the internet, it doesn't justify me having Wi-Fi when having unlimited data on my phone takes care of it. So I have reconfigured my mind into not feeling inferior just because I don't have something that probably most people have at home. You know? I refuse to let you tell me that I'm doing something wrong when to me it works, you know? It works to not have Wi-Fi at home. Everything about racism, everybody got gifts to show, but it's a system that all states have ghettos because Rothschild putting guns, drugs, hookers in the black neighborhoods, but not white neighborhoods. Yeah, like, it's no accident that certain neighborhoods are more challenged than others. But we are not asking that question. We're not asking the question of how do these things get here. But then when some people start exploring that, that's when politicians try to come out and say, oh, I'm going to be the person who fixes that because they just want your vote. And then once they're in office, you realize that they're not going to do jack shit because it was never their intention to do jack shit. Because that type of thing right there that Jordan just said, that's also a business. Someone is definitely benefiting from all that. So why would you want to cure something that's keeping you rich? It's not your interest. And it's messed up. And that's why I say that's when you need to, question your morals and ethics a little more before you can have other discussions. Hilton Head Island is the most salient example of once predominantly black-owned land that is now majority white hands, due in no small measure to partition sales. For heirs, property owners, clearing the title of the land is a key to helping them use it as an economic engine. When natural disasters occur, they cannot access FEMA funds because they don't have clear title. You cannot apply for any other housing rehab programs that require clear title. Where does that leave you? You need a bucket or you have to move. Oftentimes, landowners do not come and ask for help until there is an emergency or there has been an increase in the tax assessment of the property. If people do not receive help in title issues, the land will be lost. The land will become a gated community. Boeing is expanding. Volvo is expanding. Some of our folk are already being asked, do you want to sell your land? The land loss these black populations are experiencing is a gentrification issue transposed onto rural communities. While it is an economic issue, it is also an environmental one. Once the land is lost, it is not left green anymore. Now you see these condos with asphalt. It does not only impact the landowner, but entire communities. Stop scrolling. Entire communities. I hate it. These ads keep loading and then they shift the page and then I get lost. Black people who moved there. Okay. Now you see these condos. Okay. Adding that black people who moved there, they love the way the land looks, are themselves changing the way the land originally looked. So yeah, you guys, this pretty much goes over pretty much the same stuff. And then speculators allows judges to consider factors such as the sentimental, ancestral, and fair market value of the property. Huh, cool. There is some relief in sight for heirs property owners in South Carolina. In what could signal a trend for the rest of the South, in 2016, then Governor Nikki Haley signed the Clementa C. Pinckney Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act, named in honor of the state lawmaker among 8 murdered in an act of racial terror at Charleston Emmanuel AIM Church in 2015. The law allows co-tenants to buy out the shares of land speculators, making it difficult for land to be sold through the courts, and allow judges to consider factors such as the sentimental, ancestral, and fair market value of the property. While that act is one example in the right direction throughout the nation, black wealth is continuously undercut. For example, the Great Recession and the attendant subprime mortgage crisis that preyed upon black and Latino homeowners through institutional racism and discriminatory lending was a period of historic losses of wealth. According to the Urban Institute, black families lost 31% of their wealth between 2007 and 2010, Hispanics 44%. As a result, the racial wealth gap continues and black folks find themselves hamstrung, unable to build for the future and pass down their legacy to successive generations. Let's see. If you can get people to maximize their potential through land, they don't need a handout. Underscoring the importance of owning land and building family wealth. It is time for your child to go off to college. Maybe you have had trees growing for a while. One person who has a clear title, they had these trees cut off their land and were able to send their children to college without student loans. That money was not a loss to their family. Literally, that wealth was passed to their family. That's a very simple example of wealth building. The fact these children can come out of college without a student loan. You are starting out and not in the negative. And if your parents manage that land, you get to go back and cut the trees again. If you have clear title, you can get a mortgage and a home equity line of credit. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much it on that article. And yeah, this is just stuff that I wish was talked about more, just to keep the matter fair, because nobody talks about this stuff. Nobody teaches this, and then it ends up being dismissed and not discussed enough to where eventually we are in denial that this stuff even happened. And that is the most terrifying aspect of all this. We cannot forget what happened and what keeps happening, because if you don't know about what happens in the past, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's what we're living in. This stuff keeps happening. Let's see. Ever heard of poor white trash and the opioid epidemic? Definitely heard of the opioid epidemic. People are so scared of the ghetto, but the mafia, crooked president, doctors, lawyers, evil, rich scientists don't live in the ghetto. Isn't that crazy though, that we tend to, the way we are wired to think is we look at someone and we judge them based on attire and what they drive and what kind of job they have and where they live. And then when you think about it, those people achieved that stuff at the expense of someone. Like, someone had to be miserable, someone had to suffer in order for them to obtain that stuff. But we don't want to present it as such. We want to say, that person worked hard, that person went to school, that person earned their merits. And I'm thinking, well, that person was able to make those moves probably because they had support. They had stuff to inherit. They had the privilege of maybe living in a state or a city that supports that type of thing. But there's people who literally come from nothing. And when you come from nothing and you're trying to make something, let me tell you, it is fucking difficult. Because that is something I am trying to do right now. I'm trying to start something with absolutely nothing. And I see all the things that obstruct me, and I'm like, I want to give up, but I'm not going to. Because at least if I get to prosper to where I don't need to worry about, like, if I call out, I lose my job and I'm fucked for God knows how long. If I can get to that level, I'll be alright. You know, like I want to be able to determine at what time I get up, at what time I'm back at home, and when to have kids. And the time for that would be like right now while I'm young. But of course, I'm not going to accelerate something if it means complicating my life, you know? But but it just sucks cuz some people never have to struggle like this. And I think that we should make it easier to where people don't have to suffer so much, especially with all the resources that we have and all the resources that we waste. So I get it. You need to accept that you cannot save everything. You cannot save everybody. Like, I'll never forget that one squirrel that died in my freaking hand. I wanted to do everything to save it. I was texting my mom. I was doing all these things for it, and it still died in my freaking hands. And I told myself, I like for everyone to be happy. I like for everyone to be well. Not everyone can make it. But if you know that there is something going on that makes it deliberately unfair on some folks, why would you not want to address that and make it better? But if you constantly live in denial that this is a thing, that is exactly what perpetuates the problem. And that's what creates these political divisions that we tend to dwell on and be like, yeah, we're so split, we're so divided. You know, even dating is difficult because if you don't find someone who's perfectly compatible with your political views, then there's going to be some heat in your life. You know, that's stupid. I think that we could be investing our energy and efforts to being even more productive and a better version of ourselves. But if our society is not supporting that, what can you do? Anyways, you guys, this has definitely been an extensive stream, one that I'm grateful did not experience any interruptions that I'm aware of. So yeah, thanks so much for tuning in to this one. This is definitely not the last time I will bring this topic up because there is so much more to it than that. But this one at least hits what I consider to be the core, which is legacies and land ownership, which it brings its benefits. We cannot even deny that. And that's why there's people who take great pride in putting up their little signs that say, uh, you know, no trespassing. If you're in my property, I can shoot you and I will win the case. You know, people like to defend their lands, and it makes sense, but at the same time, it's crazy. A lot of theft, deception, lies, manipulation, and taking advantage of people that takes place. And I guess I'm like Captain America. I don't like bullies. So that is definitely beyond bullying by then. But yeah, I just hope that at some point we acknowledge that this is a thing and we address it so that future generations do not have to go through this crisis. Mental, emotional, social crisis. That's no way to live. Alright guys, I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.